And welcome to the Alex webinar on linked data cataloging workflows. This session serves as the sixth and final part of the webinar series From MARC to BIBFRAME. I'm Erin Elsie, a member of the Alex Continuing Education Committee. I will be your host for today's webinar. Our presenter today is Xiaoli Li from the UC Davis University Library, where she is head of the Content Support Services Department. Xiaoli Li is a primary member of the UCD BibFlow project, an IMLS-funded project that investigates the impact of implementing BibFrame on technical services, including cataloging and related workflows. She also serves on the ConSer BibFrame task group and co-leads the Linked Data Alumni Serials team, a group that examines BibFrame Lite vocabulary and linked data tools developed by Zafira. Xiaoli Li brings much expertise to today's topic, and we are very fortunate to have her with us today. A few logistics for today's presentation. All attendees are muted to prevent background noise, and we do not have interactive chat capabilities. You may, however, comment on today's presentation using Twitter. The hashtag is ALCTSCE. We do not monitor the Twitter feed, so if you have questions for Xiaoli Li, please type them into the question box on your screen. This webinar is being recorded, and you will receive an email with links to the recording and presentation slides shortly after the presentation concludes. And now, here is Xiaoli Li. There will be a slight delay as we change presenters.
Hello, everyone. I hope now you can see my screen. So first of all, I want to say I'm very happy to be here with you all, even though it's just virtually, to share some experience I had with linked data. And also, I want to thank you for Alex to allow me, give me this opportunity. And thanks to the presenters in the series who had a presentation before me, and they did covered a lot of grants, so made my job much easier. So for today's talk, I would say I will use a lot of knowledge still already presented to you, and also during my presentation, I will show you some connections and where the interaction with other presenters happened. So hopefully you will get a sense how the series actually developed and worked together to help you all. So for today, very quickly, I will just tell you what I'm going to cover, and also, as Erin mentioned, towards the end, I do hope there's some time for questions and suggestions or just discussing. So first of all, I want to give you a background about BibFlow project, because that project basically I will use it as a framework for today's presentation. Definitely the primary part of this talk is about cataloging workflow with BibFrame or in the linked data environment, which will cover 4 areas: copy cataloging, original cataloging, and creation of authority, also minting URI. And then doing that, also for the workflow, one of the things we always need to think about is what is the purpose of the work? So I want to give a few slides to show my interpretation of the purpose for cataloging. And towards the end, I'd like to spend a few minutes with you to talk about skills needed and what trainings available to help us. So first part is background. So what is the BibFlow project? And this is a project supported by the IMLS grant. It started in May 2014 and finished April this year. So this this 2-year project is sort of combination of UC Davis cataloging department and IT department, and with help from the FIRA, since they already have very strong experience with linked data. So the project was designed as a research project, meaning it is primarily examining the questions such as what impact will it have if library decided to adopt BibFrame as a cataloging container. So the primary delivery for this project is to come up with a roadmap which may help other libraries like UC Davis migrate into linked data without disrupting the existing services or suffering their user services. So since the project primary delivery is roadmap, and that's what I'm going to talk about for next few slides. So for the roadmap, first thing we sort of come up with, or we had to think really hard, is in the linked data environment, who are major players? So those are the 6 major players we identified, and some of them that you're already familiar with. For example, IIS, which is Integrating Library System, and the Human Discovery interface, that's your OPAC or your discovery layer. And also we do rely on a lot of vendor services. What might be new to you is triple store, machine discovery interface, and the linked data editor. So our roadmap also laid out what is interaction between those primary players, which is displayed or showed in next slides. So at this point, you do not need to worry about figuring out what the slides tell you, because that's what I'm going to talk about during today's presentation. So this is just to show you some interaction between those primary stakeholders I showed in the slides before. So I'm really excited talking about this roadmap we came up, because it looked into a lot of factors related to how we move into linked data environment. So it also gives a library different options by looking at this roadmap, and depends on what resource do they have and what is the readiness to move into the linked data environment, and what are the infrastructures already exist. So I'm just going to sort of go through this roadmap and lay out a few possible ways to move into linked data. Again, depends on your library situation. So first one is, if your library feel like infrastructure is not there, you don't have a lot of resources, you prefer stay in the MARC land for a little bit and until everything is ready for your switch, that's totally okay. And this workflow already discussed and presented by Jackie Shi and also my colleague Carl Stammer. So I'm not going to talk about this workflow today, but the primary focus for this workflow is get your MARC data ready by insert as many URIs into your MARC record as possible. The other workflow possibly exists, or probably need some more studying, is what if we just immediately move into linked data? So this workflow, as you can see on the screen, that green container, I have a big question mark there. That represents infrastructure, because at the current environment, our cataloging data supports a lot of activity. And if we just move away from what exists, move away from existing infrastructure, unless other things can move away immediately with us, we may end up break some services or make inefficiency in other area. But it doesn't mean this wouldn't work, because actually there's a group is going to look into this really hard, and that group is called Linked Data for Production. And it consists of a lot of big university libraries. They have resources, they have grant funding to help them figure out how that might work. So our approach is, how about if you take both, combine them, and change that green part from question mark to triple store, and also adding a few programs and link your triple store with your existing integrating library system. So the reason we think this might work better is because you can still rely on your integrating library system to keep your acquisition data, circulation data, and other data you needed for your library's internal operation. So this particular workflow, or this particular sort of ecosystem we have in mind, I call it a hybrid, because what happened is we were still relying on the MARC in a way to help library internal operation, but we're also able to take advantage of what linked data can offer. So from cataloging perspective, and I as a manager, I see the value of this particular ecosystem will be very helpful for my operation in two ways. One, I can have my catalog gradually moved away from MARC as the environment is a little bit ready and the infrastructure is better. And at the same time, I can keep my production going on. So in that regard, I feel like this approach is almost similar to the relay, track relay. You know, we are sort of definitely want to go as fast as possible, but sometimes you do need a little bit of dual efforts to make sure you have a smooth transition. So just like two runners, they have to overlap a little bit, make sure they're all moving forward, but make sure that transition is smooth. So for today's presentation, I'm going to primarily focus on using this ecosystem, how it affects cataloging workflow. So as displayed on the screen. So as you can tell, I have still have a triple store there, and also I have a linked data editor underneath, and I have integrating library system at the left side, and then I have other things. So I'm going to present each area in next few slides. First one I'm going to show you, which is probably the primary focus of today's presentation, is on the cataloging portion of this roadmap, because this is where I think I can share my experience and my thought and with you. So move to the part 2, cataloging workflows. First thing, as I mentioned, I'm picking out a portion of that roadmap, and I will talk about how the cataloging is happening, or I imagined how the cataloging would happen. I'm going to use two cataloging editors to help me to demonstrate the workflows. So the first one is UC Davis BibFrame Scribe, and that is a result or outcome of BibFlow project. And the second one is the Library of Congress BibFrame editor. So in Carl Stemmer's talk, he actually talked about the pros and cons of the both editors, and also give you some background information about technology side. So for my today's presentation, I'm going to primarily show you from the catalogers side, what do we see and how we might use them. So before I go into the workflow, just to quickly point out a few things about those two linked data editor. So the first one is Library of Congress BibFrame editor. So many of you probably are familiar with it already. First, a few features I'd like to point it out. Create resource, and currently there is monographs and the serials and so on. But if your library do not see any type of resource you do appears here, you can create your own template using Library of Congress BibFrame profile editor. And the other good feature about this particular editor is it sort of created the BibFrame data models already for you. So you really do not need to really know what is a BibFrame data model, because you can choose which part of the resource you want to describe. Can be instance, can be work, or can be both work and instance. And in the middle part of this slide, you see those blue labels. And then each label has a box or boxes associated with them. Those blue labels are RDA terms. So basically, they're almost like equivalent to MARC fields and subfield combination. So with this type of design, the catalogers actually do not even need to know what is underneath how the data is stored. So if you know RDA, you should be able to fill in the boxes with the information. So this is just a quick overview of the BibFrame editor. So now let's move to the BibFrame Scribe. As I mentioned, this is one of a product out of BibFlow project. I want to point it out, which Carl already mentioned in his presentation. This is a sort of prototype of the interface. It's not meant for fully functional. So if you go try it, you sort of can experiment things, but you actually do not save things or can do a lot of other things. So I just want you keep this in mind. It's not something you can use it as a production already, but it is open source, and your library are welcome to download it and enhance it and make use out of it. So as you can tell, BibFrame Scribe look slightly different from the LC BibFrame editor, because on the left side, we are sort of more followed on traditional cataloging format base instead of data model base. So we give you choices of, if it's book, you can have ebook, you have print book, but again, we have profile, you can build your own template. On the right-hand side, we do not use the RDA terminology. Instead, we use sort of just labels, which are more probably familiar to non-catalog. The reason for that, and as Carl mentioned, things are evolving, and we are not sure how much more relationship the data creation will have with tied to any particular cataloging rules. So that's why we want to make our labels a little bit sort of general than tied to any specific cataloging rule. One thing I want to mention about the BibFrame Scribe, we do try a few outside services, which meaning we use a special technology called lookup. Since those vocabularies or those data sources are linked data ready, meaning they're published as linked data. So we we can go in there and get the information and use it. Okay, now we have a basic understanding of those two tools. I'd like to show you how to fact cataloging workflow. So the first one I'm going to sort of talk about is copy cataloging, and using the BibFrame script to give you an idea of how the workflow may look like. So first part, again, this is more tied to maybe our local practices. We've started with searching our own local database to see if there's anything exists before we catalog, just to make sure we don't end up have a duplicate record. So assuming you don't find anything, then you go through your search, which you can type in ISBN number. So far for our project, we tried ISBN number, or you can use barcode scan. You can use a scanner and scan in that number. And then what would happen is then it goes to OCLC to find whether there is record created there. Since I'm demonstrating copy cataloging, assume there's a record that exists. What happened is once you find a record, once you as a cataloger, it brings back information for you to select and automatically populate those boxes for you. So that particular feature we call autofill. Once you have the enough information autofilled, and all you need to do is type in your local call number, and I'm assuming everybody still want to have the local call number, and you save it and you export it, and you're done with your copy cataloging. So next one I'd like to show you is original cataloging, and this one I will use BibFrame editor, and the BibFrame editor using looked up services. So you see this screen before, and I want to point it out, currently BibFrame editor is still in version 1.0, even though BibFrame vocabulary 2.0 already published. But the tools we currently have is not reflecting 2.0 yet, and Lab of Congress is currently working on updating this particular tools. So hopefully the revised tool will be available, then we can really practice on the vocabulary 2.0. So for today's presentation, and that's good enough to show what workflow look like. So if I'm assuming I'm cataloging a monograph, and and so there will be choice comes up. Do you want to create instance, or do you want to create a work, or do you want to do work and instance? Just in case you're not familiar with BibFrame, I'm going to show you those relationships with RDA group 1 entities. So instance is equivalent to RDA manifestation, and the work is equivalent to RDA work and RDA expression. So when I do the original cataloging, I probably would start with instance because that's the things I have in hand. So if I open that instance screen, and as you can tell, I could start putting the title and the parallel title or other data elements related to the instance or RDA manifestation. Or I could look up if there's any work exists which is associated with this instance. So if I go that route, this is what I will see. I could look up to see if the work exists. If work is not exist, then I'm going to create the work. So first thing I will do is finding information about author or primary principal creator. If I click on that particular button, and I will get a choices. Is a person, or is a family, or is a corporate body, or is it a meeting, and so on. So for today's demonstration purpose, I'm choose person. Click on person, and this other screen will come up. as I start typing into Austin Jane, actually the lookup service started going out and grab actually the information about her came back for me. So I didn't even have to finish typing. I could just choose Jane Austen and click on Serve Change. And this is the screen I will see after I saved it. And also, what is the relationship of this person to the resource I'm describing? That's what RDA relates information. Again, this cataloging editor give me the choice of just choosing from here, and I start typing, then the choice comes out. If I select author and save the change, and this is what I as a cataloger see. I'm very happy and I got all the information I need. But I want to show you what is the machine sees and also what is stored inside. So this is what we call the triples. And that's basically is how the linked data is one of presentation of the linked data. So the information you put it in is showing here. It's a person, and that person has a URI. You didn't put URI in, but the lookup service found that URI for you and put it there associated with the name you put it in. You just put it in. And also, again, so if you have URI, your machine, little guy is very happy. As a human, we like to see the string, meaning we'd like to see the actual name instead of a bunch of URI addresses. So this is what it also stored there for you. Again, it's information useful to a human being. And as you can tell, we also select what roles this person played in creation of this resource. So that information is displayed in other triples. It says that person is related to that resources, and what role the person played is the author. So that is what is the linked data about. Is it gives very, very explicitly expressed information to machine. So machine can use those data and make meaning out of it, the machine itself, instead of we need a human being to interpret. Okay, so assuming next thing you will do is subjects for the work. This is what will come up. Again, here's another place, use lookup service. I'm just start typing. I want to find something about the history. I just start typing the words, the letters in, then the choice comes up already. So if I didn't see anything I'm looking for, I'm just keep typing, and then eventually I see something I like. So as you can tell from this screen, this is not only give you the LCSH, it also gives you LC NIF, because sometimes you could have a person's name or some organization's name themselves as a subject. So for this presentation, I'm choosing the one history and criticism and theory. So I choose it and I select it and I saved it. Again, once I save it, this is when I see the words or the string I choose. But what does the machine see? And this is what is saved. It says it has authority, that's URI, and also has those labels which are familiar to us. Once you created the work, you save it, as you can tell, and that work, that URI related to work automatically stored in that instance description for you, linked them together, and now you can start filling out your title, your variant title, or whichever information is applicable to the resource you're trying to describe. For this presentation, I'm going to just pick up one to show you how it might work. I'm going to pick up the publication information. So if you click on that box, this is what you will see. You will see it laid out for you, place of the publication and the publisher's name and the date of publication. So if you follow RDA rules, you just put information there, you save it. Again, everything is like you used to see, except not in the MARC fields anymore. But this is what the machine see. Machine will see the place name, the provider's name, and provider's date, meaning publication date. So at this point, you probably already see there's no URI to those specific labels you put it in, and your computer feeling really sad because your computer feel like it doesn't have, he or she doesn't have work to do. What if we decided we could actually, using some vocabulary related to the name or place name or publisher's name or even the date, if there's any URI vocabulary, URI enabled vocabulary ready, could we think about using them just to take advantage of linked data? This is the first question I'm posting today, and I have a few and afterwards. Okay, so at this point, you probably feel, wow, that's very easy. So, I mean, everything's good. If you find everything and you can do your cataloging very quickly. What if you do not find authorities which you do not have URI to use? And here I'm going to use both BibFrame Scribe and the BibFrame Editor to show you possible different approach. And I want to warn you, this is the area I think there will be a lot of questions, and not just because of this presentation, but it's just because this is the area actually will fundamentally change how we do cataloging and what roles our cataloging data will play, and what efficiencies we will achieve, and what infrastructure we need locally, and what infrastructure we need nationally, and also whether we trust other people's data or do we feel like we have to create our own data. So there will be a lot of issues and a lot of unknowns surrounding this area, and I think that I really hope we'll start a conversation and move into somewhere we all feel comfortable and can start working towards to that goal. But for today's presentation, let me just show you currently using existing tools what you can do. If you couldn't find authority name, authority record for me, and currently if you use BibFrame approach, it suggests you go create an authority record first, and then you can link them up later. But if you don't have it, and then there's no URI associated with my name at this point. If you use BibFrame Scribe, and this is what you could do, is you put a name there and you put any information just like you're creating sort of authority data, and then when you save it, that tool will automatically mint a URI for associate with my name. So in that way, there's a URI to my name already. So question I'm going to pose. The second question is, as I mentioned at the very beginning of this part, do we truly feel like we should create sort of authority or associate URI for every single name, or should we start thinking about maybe we could trust or use other very trustworthy URIs enabled name identifier out there already. So 2 examples, ORCID ID, which many researchers are start using them or have been using them. So regardless person published something in the monograph or in any formal publication or not. So there is ORCID ID exists for many people and including myself. So one possible option is, why would I create authority data for me if there's a ORCID ID already exists? Or the other IDs exist and also have been heavily used is ISNI, which is ID for individuals and for organizations. The other question I'm thinking about, by the way, I came from China, so definitely CJK cataloging is one of my favorite topic every time when I think about cataloging. In our cataloging database, just like probably most of you, we do put CJK CJK scripts into it. So when you have those, how are you going to tie the name to the URI? In the current cataloging practice, we use Romanized form for those people, and then we add their native form of the name. So in our cataloging record, are you going to put in the URI for Romanized form, or should we just use the URIs which created by the National Library in those places for those people already? So that's another question, and I showed the example on the slide for you to think about. So now moving to subjects. We have very long tradition of LC subject headings, and we call them strains, or you call them pre-coordinated or post-coordinated, that they have many components into it, which has served the library and our library users very well. But how to work in the linked data environment, and that's the question and we should think about. So I'm going to use this example to show you. There is geographic, there is topic subdivision, and there is chronological subdivision, and there's a form division. So currently, there's no URI for this whole string, and the BibFrame editor does give you option to put them as a string, showing like here, and then if you save it, this is what you see. You see authorized access point, but again, there's no URI for it. Let's look at how you could put into subject headings or subject information using BibFrame Scribe. So our thinking is it opened up different boxes for you to fill in the information, and then eventually maybe all of those individual components do have URIs which you can use. At the same time, you can save that whole string since that has been useful, and many people want to keep that information. So I showed you 2 different ways to maybe create a subject. So now I'm going to using a few of presentations Kevin Ford did in 2013 to lead to another set of questions I'm going to ask you. So in 2013, Kevin did say that examine the LC subject heading in the LC catalog database, and they found that many of them do have LC headings established for them, but there's many known concepts. There's no LCSH in the authority file for them. So the number is over 5 million. And he also looked at a combination of those subject headings and particularly highlight the ones with form subdivision, and which is highlighted in blue on this slide. As you can see, that's on the left side, that's the subfield. AV means main topic plus form subdivision, and AZ means AZV, and AXV, AZZV. So as you can see, there is more than 3 million LCSH in LC subject in LC catalog actually has form subdivisions. So with this two sort of data in as a background, first question I'm going to post is pre-coordinated subject string still useful in linked data environment? If so, should we create a URI for every single known concept, meaning string? Or maybe make it less daunting to do is, could we think about separate form divisions from the LCSH string to make it more possible for us to find existing URI to use, like the approach National Library of Medicine took last year? Third question, maybe we could also start thinking about using other existing vocabulary instead of creating new ones. And here are just a few examples. So I think I talked about the workflow, but as I mentioned, the reason we create cataloging data is to support something. And here I'm back to the roadmap. So I finished talking about the workflow, but your data need a place to store, and that's where triple store come to play. And also we need the integrating library system store other data. So we need to push that linked data we created into that integrating library system to support internal library operation. And also, sorry, I went backwards instead of forward. So, and the other thing, your cataloging data support human discovery. So your triple store need to work with your interface, and then that interface can go outside, external, to grab more information. This is where linked data are very useful. And that system can also come to your integrating library system, grab circulation data and location data. Most important, the purpose we create linked data is to be able to share with organization outside of the library community. So you need to publish it so other machine, other computer programs can utilize the data we created. So I'm finishing the workflow, and then I'm going to switch to what skills and training might be needed to help us to do the work. So skills needed for the near future, I want to emphasize is near future because linked data is area evolving very quickly. So during the transition, this is my thought. You actually have all the knowledge needed to create linked data with good tools like BibFrame editor. So at this point, you can forget everything I said. All you need to remember is you have all the knowledge needed if you want to create linked data, even today. If you go back and try to use BibFrame editor, you will feel very comfortable because you're familiar with RDA terms, and you have a good judgment, and you have ability to analyze relationships and make connections. But if you want to do a little bit more and learn a little bit more, and some basic understanding of the linked data and RDF may be helpful. Just like when we're learning RDA, we need to know those terms so we can communicate very well. But you actually, for the linked data, you actually at this point, you do not need to be an expert in order to create metadata. So if you're metadata policy makers, well, you still need to know the cataloging rule and so on. And maybe you need some understanding how linked data impact applications in the library. So in that case, you may want to have more knowledge about data modeling and sparkles and the API, a bunch of the new terms. So fundamentally, I feel what we all need is ability to develop skills to coping with change, because that is applicable to all the change, regardless if it's technical change or it's culture change. So you need to be flexible and positive and able to dealing with ambiguity. And also, importantly, you need to be curious about things and willing to learn. And here, move to the training. And there's a very good document prepared by PCC Standing Committee on Training. And I strongly suggest you go and read it and pick up the resources mentioned there to see what would be useful to you. And here I'm going to highlight just two of them because I found they're very useful to me. First one is LC's BibFrame training material. There's two parts. And if you finish parts 1, part 2, and there's a quiz there to help you to assess your understanding. And this gives you very good introduction to BibFrame and semantic web linked data. And the other tool is very useful. It's called LD for PE. It is based on competency to help people to see, okay, if I'm interested to learn more about RDF, what resources are out there, and you can grab the resource and create your own training material together. So with that, one thing I want to emphasize is we're all new to this, and we all need to learn about it. So if we have an open mind and if we're willing to learn, I think we will get there. Thank you so much. Now, I want to thank you a few people, as I said, learning together. And those individuals, Carl, Gloria, and Jackie, Nancy, and Paul, they all helped me on this presentation particularly, but throughout of my journey of learning linked data, and I want to thank them very much. So now I'm ready for questions. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Xiaoli. This has been a really thorough session. We covered quite a bit. So now we do have time for questions to the audience. If you have any questions, now is the time to answer them in that question box. And we do have a few in there so that we can start taking. The first one is, Xiaoli, can you give a brief definition of the triple store?
Okay. So the triple store basically is a storage where you can put the metadata you created in the linked data format into it. So some triple store is just a storage. Then you have to put application around it to use it. But there's probably a good triple stores already have some features you can start building upon. So examples were mentioned in Carl Stammer's presentation. But if you want names, I will provide it to you after this presentation.
Okay, thank you. And that would probably be really useful. We will collect any questions that we're not able to get to at the very end, and if we could maybe put the list that you just said in that, send out when we send out the answers, I'm sure they would appreciate that. The next question is, do the BibFrame editors handle other scripts easily in that web interface?
Other scripts, meaning, okay, I know people cannot talk, so other scripts, I assuming it means like CGK, other type of representation of the metadata. Currently, frankly, I have to tell you, I didn't try to use BibFrame editor for that, but I do not see why it would make it harder, because it's just the box is a web interface. You type anything in, it will take it.
Okay. Our next question is, what do you mean by thin mark?
Very good question. A thin mark, thinking about like your access level record in your database, or I call it a brief record, or you call it access record or inventory record. So it's just enough information for internal operation to identify that particular resource. So during our BibFlow project, we did some internal survey of our other departments or units. For example, our acquisition units, circulation, and our and our collection development officers. We ask them, when you look at cataloging records now in our own database, not OPAC, what type of information are most useful to help you to do your work? Bibliographic data help you to do your work. So most of them come up with 5 or 6 data elements. So everybody says title, author, maybe ISBN number or ISSN number, and the publisher, publication information, including place of publication, publisher, and publication date. So that's the same mark I'm talking about. Just a few data elements enough to support your internal inventory control. So could it be just 5 basic elements, or could it be doubling core type of basic doubling core elements? So very, very same, meaning because you're not using that information to support your discovery. It's mainly to support your internal library operations.
Okay, so it's just the most basic of MARC fields that you need that your ILS might require.
Exactly.
Okay. Our next question is about fast headings, and is there a reason that you are not considering the use of fast headings?
Yeah, that's another very good question, and I think that topic has come up in several meetings and I've been attending. Fast heading is basically, in a way, the reason, yes, for the library, if you don't feel pre-coordinated strings is not useful anymore, you could adapt just to use fast heading, because every fast heading has associated URI, which make them link the data and friendly. But from my understanding and from a lot of argument I have heard is, when you break those components, when you break LC strings into fast heading, a lot of semantic meaning lost, meaning how those headings work together or define particular topic. That type of granularity lost. So I didn't list there, doesn't mean you shouldn't use. I'm just to list a few examples. But again, if your library has faceted display or discovery layer, fast heading maybe work very well for you.
Okay, thank you. Our next one is that lookup services seem limited to browsing and require knowledge of the first term of a string. Is it possible to do keyword searching? Otherwise, catalogers would need another source to find the correct term.
Well, that's very good point. I think at this point, I think the lookup service doesn't seem to work well if you just do the keywords. But I'm sure if that's something, just like everything else, it started with something, and then people start using it, feel like, oh, what if? Eventually, that probably will come. But at this point, I haven't really experienced to know keywords actually work. It has to be sort of like left encode search.
Okay. What do you do with creators that have no authority records and are not listed in any existing lists such as ORCID?
In that case, you have multiple choices. have multiple options, maybe say this way. So some library think still necessary to have a central place for the library create authority data for that individual, or some library decided that we'll just do it locally and let the authority reconciliation service take care of that. So this is another topic Carl Stemmer talked about in his presentation, which I can probably show you quickly what he talked about. And I knew this may come up, so I copied his slides. So this is a current environment. We all do the work in OCLC and get authority strings, and then we populate in our own data, in our own records. So this, he has a very good title there, central point proliferation. So, but then he also talked about if we mint local URI, meaning you create URI in your own database, and would you share and how you share with others, because we end up everybody create their own, then that will be chaos for in terms of managing things. So he also talked about how about for the linked data, which you can, it doesn't care who created, you can create relationship between those. So the other model he has is peer-to-peer collaboration, but he did talk about pros and cons about different approach. So this is a reconciliation service he talked about. And again, he is expert in those areas. I'm not going to rephrase what he said, but basically you need some service to reconciliate those different local URIs you created. And then he also presented an ecosystem for it. So this is a portion of his presentation towards the end. So if you're really interested to know how those work, I suggest you go back and listen to that part of his presentation.
Okay, thank you. And we have a few more brief questions, I think. One, is there a final report available for BibFlow?
Yes, we still in writing. As soon as we're done, we will definitely share with everybody who is interested. We like to get people to read it and then let us know how they think, and we definitely will take feedback as well.
Okay. And then finally, do you have live catalog data that people can look at?
In linked data format?
I believe so.
For my own institution, no, we don't. But you can easily create one yourself, or you can go to Library of Congress, because I don't know if any of you, I don't know who posted this question, but first webinar in the series, Library of Congress talked about the pilot project they did. And they also talked about the pilot number 2 they're going to do. So the first pilot project they did, all the records they created are still available for those who are interested to see. You can go there and see it. Again, I can send out a link for Alex to share with everybody who is interested.
Yeah, that would be great. We could include that in our final email. So that's all the questions that we had submitted today. Thank you, Xiaoli. We are glad that you all could be with us today. You will soon receive a short online evaluation form. Please take a few minutes to respond to the questions, and your comments are very valuable and do help the ELECT's Continuing Education Committee plan future events. The email will also include links to today's slides and recording. You now have the opportunity to receive a certificate of attendance, and that information will be included in the email as well. Thank you to our presenter, Xiaoli Li. Thanks also to members of the Continuing Education Committee, Joseph Nicholson and Mary Reeder, and to Megan Doherty from the ELECT's office. The support they provide make it possible for us to present these webinars. We have many other events coming up. On November 30th, we have a webinar on budget transparency and collection development. And in December, we have one on research data management practices. Please see the ELECT website to register or to find more information on these. ELECT also offers web courses, which are 4 to 6 weeks long, as well as 2-day email discussions. Check the website for information on upcoming courses and discussions. Thank you everyone for joining us today. This will conclude our session.